When we took office in January 11, we were looking at a $2.7 billion hole, and it's exactly what Mr. Cobb mentioned. We had taken stimulus money, and that stimulus money ended. So that is what created that deficit that we were facing on day one. And we do have to be very careful. And the departments under the Democrat administration has always, in my opinion, had the theory that we need universal health care. And we don't care how they don't care how they get it. So we've increased child health. We've lowered the eligibility for Medicaid. We continue to piecemeal it. Now we have Obamacare in front of us. And as Representative Brown said, that was the only action that we had the option to take was freedom of court brief to be involved in that suit. Unfortunately, we do not have an Attorney General that would go to bat for the state of North Carolina.
Chris, I think your question is an excellent question. It's a genuine question. And I mean no disrespect by what I'm getting ready to say, but I found humor in your question. Humor because you talk about, on one hand, the federal government, and you talk about unfunded mandates. This is a perfect example of the pot calling the kettle black. On UNC TV not long ago, Senator Alan Simpson, who is a respected Republican, and Erskine Bowles, who is a respected Democrat, they were both appointed to the bipartisan commission by the president. In that presentation at the Duke University Public Policy School, Erskine Bowles talked about the treaty that the United States has with the Taiwanese government. And the treaty says that if the Taiwanese are invaded by the Chinese, we will come to the rescue of the Taiwanese, which means we've got to borrow the money from the Chinese to fight the Taiwanese. 40% of the dollars that we spend today are borrowed money anyway. If there's never been an unfunded mandate example, it's a perfect example of what's going on in our federal government. For them to talk to us about unfunded mandates is really the pot calling the kettle black.
I'm not sure I understand the tie-in there, but there's always the carrot from the federal government, and you really have to look very carefully at what stick is behind that carrot. And we have consistently, over the years, grabbed everything that was out there under the Democratic administration. And that's one of the things that's going to be so important in 13, that we get our house in order totally in North Carolina.
I believe that generally government is expected to provide some level of benefits and responsibilities to their citizens. If you polled citizens, I think they would all agree that one of the most important priorities is protection. And a lot of us, protection of our citizens. And I think some of us immediately think of physical protection, that the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Sheriff, the police would provide for us. But another side of that coin is cultural protection, and that deals with immigration. I was attending the Wells Fargo Chamber of Commerce meeting in December last year when a noted economist spoke to the group, and he had a rather startling fact that he reported, and that was in the last 10 years, on grocery store shelves, one product had now changed to outsell another product, and that was salsa. Now outsells ketchup. I think what this lets us know is we're in a changing culture. And if you're paying attention to what's happening in Europe and the international market with the Muslims taking over the European common market, that has become a state of socialism. It is not unbelievable that we have that same level of challenge with the issues that are in this country today.
I don't believe it's an individual state issue that we can correct. I think until we have a new president and all the states come together, it's a federal issue. And money comes from the federal government. Always follow the money. And most of our schools, we can't ask if they're legal or not. So we're funding that. The same thing in the emergency rooms at the hospital. Your three areas of great expense for the hard-working taxpayers of the state is the health care, the education, and the police protection. When these folks are charged and taken into court, if they don't speak English, we provide an interpreter. It's the same thing in the school system. It's English as a second language. But I don't think that it's anything that we can piecemeal state by state by state. We've got to elect a new president, and we've got to get that guidance from that new president.
I don't think there's any question that the first line of defense for our borders is the federal government. But the federal government has failed us unquestionably with that. North Carolina, on the other hand, has not scored higher marks in their inability to be diligent in the way that they passed out driver's license and IDs like daffodils in spring. That was not an appropriate measure either. First issues should be taken care of at home and within the state boundaries.
Thank you, Chris, and I want to say a special thanks as I look out and see so many friends and supporters from Davie County here tonight. That means a lot. I served for 8 years on the Monksville Town Board, and this is my 24th year being in the North Carolina House. Under the direction of Speaker Tillis, I am the Senior Finance Chair that will address all taxes and that side of the budget. I'm also the chair of the Program Evaluation Committee, and that is a committee that is looking at all of the various programs in state government that has waste and abuse and fraud. And actually, yesterday we voted to sell the governor's helicopter. It's a big workload in Raleigh, and I relish that workload. But I will tell you one thing, it's not necessarily all the big things that you can do. You go in with a tremendous agenda, and such is our budget, and I will say proudly in 77 days from the day that we were seated in the North Carolina House, we had a balanced budget on the governor's desk. It's also the small things that you do, as Representative Brown said. It's taking care of your people, the things that they need in their district, and it's something that I love to do. I have tried to do my very best, and I would certainly hope to go back and serve another term and continue to get North Carolina where it deserves to be.
Website? You have a website?
I do. Representative Julia C. Howard.
For perhaps the last 40 years, I've sat in meetings just like this. Because like you, I always cared who represented me before I ever decided to run. But the only difference between those of you that are sitting out there and the 5 of us that are sitting up here is we're applying for a job to work for you and to represent you in Raleigh. I know people, and I know business, and government is managing the people's business. if you send me to Raleigh for you, I promise I'll give you your money's worth. And I don't have a website. I got a telephone and a place where I live and work, and your calls are always welcome, and your visits are always welcome. Thank you, Chris.